Hey guys, so I come to you with an original tag. This is a tag that Jason of Old Blues Chapter and Verse and myself are putting out jointly. And it's the Deathbed Tag. And it's inspired in large part by a video that Neil Griffiths did. Some of you may remember Neil Griffiths when he used to make videos. He, I think, posted his last video over a year ago, and he was a fabulous booktuber. But he sadly has seemed to leave BookTube. But one of my favorite of his videos is a book called On My Deathbed, where he talks about what books he thinks he'll read on his deathbed. And I've always been fascinated by that question. Part of me, I guess, rebels against the idea because I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily have a deathbed. Some people just die very suddenly and they're just gone, and so they don't really, a lot of people won't have the privilege of having a deathbed. Not that you have to be privileged to have a deathbed in a sense, but a lot of people won't have the chance to experience the works of art that they want to before they shuffle off this mortal coil. But in this tag, we ask you, if you saw your death ahead and you knew it was coming, but you had some time, what works of art would you go for? What would you want to experience in your last days, weeks of life? And for me, it was about what works of art make me feel elevated. So Neil in his video talks about having a sort of falling away when you read a great poem or listen to a great piece of music, a sort of falling away, a sort of detachment from the self that you get when you're enraptured by a great work of art, especially for me, music, more than books even, but books too. And that was sort of, those were the kinds of works of art that I think I would be compelled to search for if I knew I was going to die. Because I think that those are the works of art that do the most to reconcile us with our limited human perspective to this world that we've been forced to live in, that is so full of suffering and is so weird and mysterious. I remember a few weeks ago Jason posted his video about Nothing to Be Frightened Of by Julian Barnes, and Julian Barnes' book is all about death and reconciling yourself to death. And I remember in my comment on that video saying, well, I've never so much been afraid of death so much as I've been mystified by existence. Why is there something rather than nothing? That's always been a baffling question to me, much more than what happens after I die. I'm pretty certain of what will happen after I die. I think I will dissolve into dust and, descend into oblivion. But then Mark Nash kind of responded to my comments saying, well, aren't those two questions kind of inherently interconnected? Because in order to die, you need to, exist. And yeah, I think he's right. So I think, well, anyway, that's kind of all beside the point. But I picked works of art that most reconcile me to this world and that most make me experience that sort of falling away. So there are questions in this tag that ask about many different works of art. And the first question is actually not about books, it's about music. So what music do you hope to listen to in the final days or weeks of your life? And there's quite a bit for me. Music is the ultimate art form for me. I think that it touches something very subconscious and primal in humans. I remember talking with Crystal over at BiblioAtlas. She doesn't make videos anymore, but she and I talked about music, and she actually said that she thinks that music may be older than language, and I thought that was such a fascinating hypothesis. And the way that it affects me, at least, is so much more intense than the way that literature affects me. Even though I love books, I think music is the ultimate art form for me. And I think music is ideal because I honestly, if I have a deathbed, I don't think I'll want to do much reading. I think I will be mostly talking to people, reconciling myself to the people who were alive, and making my peace with my mortality. But music, you can listen to it at any time, so it's relatively an easy art form to experience, and also, again, the most profound art form. So the pieces of music I picked, the operas of Richard Wagner, especially the Ring Cycle, but also Tannhauser and Lohengrin and Tristan and Isolde, and perhaps Parsifal. Certainly the overture to Parsifal would be something that I listen to, but absolutely I will be listening to a ton of Wagner on my deathbed. The choral music of Johann Sebastian Bach, some of the most sublime pieces ever written. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, that final movement especially. Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. The second movement of that just gets me every time. Sigur Ros's Untitled album, the great Icelandic band Sigur Rós, their Untitled album. One of the greatest albums of any genre ever released. Explosions in the Sky, their album The Earth Is Not a Cold Dead Place. It's right there in the title. Departure Songs by the Australian band We Lost the Sea. My Head is an Animal, which is incidentally an album by another Icelandic band, Of Monsters and Men. Low Roar, another Icelandic artist. He's actually a solo guy, but he goes under the name Low Roar. His self-titled album. And then Lost Memory by Coma Cinema, which again is a solo guy who goes under a name, which is an album all about loss and despair and sort of the screwed upness of the world. Anatomy of the Bear, an American band, an American post-rock band, their self-titled album. And then Modest Mouse's album, Good News for People Who Love Bad News, which is one of the most weirdly cheerful sounding, depressing albums I've ever listened to. But anyway. So the next question is, what novel or novels do you hope to read in the final days or weeks of your life? There's only one for me that I think I will read, and certainly not in its entirety again. I don't think I'll have the energy to read an entire novel, but How It Is by Samuel Beckett, because it's a novel about these people who are crawling around through mud, living off of these packs of food that are on their back, and occasionally, and they spend most of their time alone, but occasionally they will run into someone else, and that other person will whisper in their ear, and then after a while, they part ways. And this novel just deals so directly with what are we doing here? What is the deal with this weird universe we live in? And it does it in a completely non-religious way, which I find fascinating. That it accepts the abyss of nihilism and the fact that there is no God, the belief that there is no God, which Samuel Beckett did, and I do as well, and the fact that life really sucks, but somehow also manages to affirm, being alive. So I will read How It Is, or parts of How It Is. And then the next question, what films would you watch? The Tree of Life, directed by Terrence Malick, for the same reason as How It Is. It just deals so primally with so many questions about what are we doing here, And then When Marnie Was There, I can't remember the name of the director, but this is a Japanese anime film about a 12-year-old girl who is lonely and hates herself, and kind of finds friendship through a ghost who she meets at this large sort of lake house in the countryside. This girl's story has just always resonated with me so much, and the film brought me to tears. It's Such a Beautiful Day, animated and directed and pretty much entirely created by Don Hertzfeldt, which is about a man whose brain is basically unhinged. It's not clear what is really going on. He might have a tumor or something, but basically this man is just losing his mind. And it's only an hour long. This animated film is about his family history, his very screwed up family history. And yeah, I'm gonna go through like a broken record if I talk about why I want to watch each of these. It all kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning of the movie, but It's Such a Beautiful Day is about this man sort of making his peace with his father, who was not the best guy, and making his peace with his screwed up family history and with the universe. And then 2 short films, The Meaning of Life, also created by Don Hertzfeldt, and The House of Small Cubes. And I'll leave links to those 2. If you haven't watched those, you should just go watch them. They're both under 15 minutes. And then the next question is, what static or visual works of art do you hope to consider? Yeah, there are 3 that I think I will consider. The first is Entry into Port of a Ship with a Red Rose Aboard by Enzo Cucci, which is one of the most surprisingly moving paintings I've ever seen. In the corner of this, it's all in black and white except for a little speck of red, but in the corner of this painting there's what looks like a ship, obviously, and then the rest of the painting sort of has a gray background that sort of looks vaguely like an ocean, and then there are crosses, Christian crosses, just littered throughout this ocean, and this ship in the corner has a little speck of red, and just look it up. It's incredible painting. And then Christ on the Cross by Diego Velázquez, most moving painting I've ever seen. And then Saint Jerome by Leonardo da Vinci, which I saw in person at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and which is mesmerizing. Yeah, just mesmerizing. Go look it up. It achieved something that no other painting has for me, in that I felt like detached from myself in it. It's about Saint Jerome sort of having this ecstatic experience, and I can't explain what I felt when I looked at it. What poems do you hope to read in your final days? Wallace Stevens. I will have my collected Wallace Stevens by my side. I will read his poem Sunday Morning, and I will also read Walt Whitman, especially Song of Myself, and When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed. And I will read parts of the Iliad, especially the final 2 books, which are 2 of the just most melancholy, heartbreaking passages in all of literature for me, but that are just so beautiful that one can't help but feel elevated by them, I think. Next is there a religious text or section of a religious text that you hope to read in your final days and weeks? The Book of Job, I think. There is a passage in the Book of Job in particular where Job has just sort of indicted God. He's talking to God, and he's just sort of indicted God, and like, how could you create this awful world full of so much suffering and despair? What do you think you're doing here? And then God sort of responds with this series of sort of rhetorical questions, almost mockingly, saying, well, where were you when I made the heaven and the earth? Where were you when I did this? If you know what happened when I created the universe, then all power to you. Tell me what, and he's basically giving a non-answer, but also kind of the only answer that I think any religious or secular person can have to this world, which is that we don't really know what we're doing here. And it's a beautiful passage, even though it is kind of mocking in a sense. And then the last question is just sort of a catch-all. Is there another work of art, drama, dance, nonfiction, others, unrepresented in the above categories that you hope to encounter or engage with one last time in the final days or weeks of your life? There will be scenes from operas that I will be looking up, especially the scene where Electra, in Richard Strauss's opera, Electra first sees Oreste, her brother Oreste, or Orestes in the original Sophocles play. She she sees Orest that he's alive. She thought he was dead up to that point in the opera, and she just sees that he's alive, and she just unleashes this huge note saying his name, Orest. Really, I can't do it. I would never try to imitate it, but it's one of the most gorgeous pieces of opera ever, pieces of theater ever. And I will watch the ending of Act 1 of Die Walküre by Richard Wagner, where the siblings, Sieglinde and Siegmund, declare their love for one another. It's weird to watch it because they're brother and sister, and they know they're brother and sister, and they're declaring their love for each other, but there is something profoundly touching and moving about their story, and that scene is just one of the most incredible endings of any act ever. And the music is absolutely sublime. And then the end, the immolation scene in Götterdämmerung, where Brunhilde where she destroys this ring that has caused so much destruction and suffering by throwing herself on her lover's funeral pyre. And then I will watch I think I will watch Krapp's Last Tape by Samuel Beckett. I will watch it. It's a play, a very short play about a man who has kept recordings of himself on a tape recorder at different periods throughout his entire life. And this play is just him listening to his past recordings. And it's just all about regret and kind of how small people can be, I suppose. It's about thinking back on the past. And so it'll be perfect at that point, because that's what I'll be doing a lot of. So anyway, that's the Deathbed Tag. Not the most cheerful tag, but I do have a few people I want to tag. I'm going to tag Sharon Goforth. I'm going to tag Samuel Darham. I'm going to tag Brian over at Book Wanting. And I will tag Too Tight Lautrec. And I really look forward to your answers. Anyway, I will talk to you all later. I hope this hasn't been too heavy. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I look forward to your comments. And I'll talk to you later.